Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is contemplate. And this verb was suggested by the viewer Kareem, so thank you so much for this suggestion, and I want to encourage anybody watching this video, if you have an idea, I'd love for you to share it. I really enjoy making videos that meet students' needs. So with that, let's take a look at some of the ways or the definitions of this verb, some of the ways that we use the verb contemplate. So the first way you might hear contemplate used means to look thoughtfully for a long time at something. Related to that, a second definition or way to use it, to think about something. Our third definition, to meditate or think profoundly at length. And fourth way to use our verb contemplate means to have in mind as a probable, though not certain, intention. So I hope as we look at those four definitions, you see something similar about all of them. All of these involve thinking. And another characteristic that is rather similar here is that it is it's not a quick process, right? This is not a short thought and then, okay, I'm making a decision and I'm doing something. But this is generally an action where someone is thinking through things in greater detail before acting or before deciding something. For now, you should know that contemplate is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, we're going to drop the E on the end before we add ing, and that's because this verb ends with the vowel consonant E pattern. To make the past tense and participle forms of our verb, all we're going to do here is add the letter D since this verb already ends in an E. Now our base verb, contemplate, while it ends with the letter E, the ending sound is a T sound. So when I add the ed ending, I'm also going to add an extra syllable to this verb. So the way the past tense and participle forms of our verb tend to be pronounced is contemplated, contemplated. Hope you can hear that ending tid as the last syllable there. Now, I'll mention very briefly that we don't have any additional phrasal verbs that we need to study at this moment. So instead, we're going to move on and do a little verb tense practice. Today, we'll review the past progressive, verb tense, and the past perfect. Let's start with the past progressive. Now, many teachers, textbooks, and even other YouTube videos that talk about verbs will sometimes call this the past continuous, and that's just fine. Past progressive, past continuous, they mean exactly the same thing. In this verb tense, we are describing an action that was ongoing or an action that was continuing during a time in the past. The reason I say past progressive with my students is I like them to remember two P's to the name of the verb tense. So past progressive means you need two parts to make your verb. So this is a verb tense where we need to pay attention to our subject. If our subject is you, we, or they, we're going to use were, W-E-R-E, that's a past form of be, and then we're going to use that ing form of the verb. But if our subject is I, he, she, or it, we're going to use was, W-A-S. That's, again, another past form of be. And then we use the ing form of the verb. Here is an example sentence. She was contemplating her life choices as she trudged through the brush for the fourth day. So I believe I saw a sentence similar to this in a story, and the story was describing a really difficult journey that someone had decided to take. They didn't have to take it, but they had decided to. And you can imagine that word trudge there is suggesting really difficult walking. It's not easy. It's not something that's flat or smooth, but maybe a very challenging kind of terrain. And here, I think this is a person who's thinking about, like, what have I gotten myself into? And not a quick thought, right? This is a thought that's continuing and continuing as this person continues to walk or hike. Now, let's take a look at a negative past progressive sentence. To do this, again, you start with your subject. You're going to use either were not and then the ing form of the verb, or was not and then the ing form of the verb. Now, you can make contractions with both. So were not would become weren't, and was not would become wasn't. You can see that in my example here. The lawyer said his client wasn't contemplating making a deal with the government. Okay, so here, what they're saying, this is not something that is ongoing. It's not something they're thinking about. Now, let's move on and talk about making a yes or no question in the past progressive. To do this, you're going to start with your past form of be. You're going to use the form that matches your subject. That subject comes next. Then use the ing form of the verb. Here's our last example. Were you contemplating a career change during the pandemic? And to that question, some people might say, yes, I was, or no, I wasn't. And again, the idea here is not just a quick thought, one day I'm going to quit my job and do something different, but like, is this what I want to be doing with my time? Is this the kind of work that I find valuable? Right? There are many other considerations. And again, that usually tends to be kind of a longer thought process. Now let's move on and talk about sentences in the past perfect. This past tense verb tense is really focused on actions that occurred before a certain point in the past or before another action. So we're generally always talking about a completed action here in the past perfect. The reason or the thing that sets it apart from just the simple past tense is, again, that emphasis on the action occurring before either a certain time or before another action. Again, you'll notice 2 letter P's to the name of our verb tense, past perfect. And it's going to mean you need 2 parts to make your verb. So in the affirmative, you're going to start with your subject. You're going to use the past form of have, that's had, and then you're going to use the participle form of the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. Basketball star Brittany Griner said she had contemplated taking her own life after being arrested by Russian authorities in 2022. Now, as I do this with every verb, I should say, I look for examples. How is this being used in newspapers and magazines, literature, right? I look for real examples. And it was a little difficult to see how many past perfect examples there were connected to this topic of suicide or taking one's own life. So I feel like it's a good reminder that many people have that feeling at some point during their lives. And that's when you got to talk to somebody because everybody's life is so very valuable. You mean so much to others. So if you happen to be watching this and you feel like maybe you can identify with this example sentence, please talk to someone. There are many wonderful resources all over the globe to help people in instances like that. So again, that she had contemplated is noting this action occurred before. This is thankfully, to my knowledge, not an action that's continuing into the present. And so that's why we see that. Now let's take a look at a negative example. To do negative past perfect, again, your structure is subject, had not, and then the participle. Here's another example. She hadn't contemplated her own death before receiving the terminal diagnosis. So again, I apologize. I've got some sad example sentences here with contemplate and again, that idea of deep thought, but deep thought tends to occur with very serious situations, serious matters. So a terminal diagnosis, in case that's a new phrase for you, just means that the doctor or team of doctors has said whatever sort of ailment, maybe it's a disease, this disease is ultimately going to kill you. It's going to result in your death. So here we had somebody who was just living their lives, never really thinking about like what's going to happen or what might this be like. And then that person received this horrible news. Finally, let's do a yes or no question in the past perfect. To do this, start with had, then you're going to have your subject, and then that participle form of the verb. Here's my last example. Had he contemplated retirement before the season started? Again, pretty common to see that time signal before with this particular verb tense. Now let's move on and talk about some words that are related to our verb contemplate. And the first word we're going to discuss today is the noun form of this word. So we do have a spelling change, and you're going to notice a little change in the pronunciation. We have contemplation. When I use this word as a noun, many times I'm talking about the action of looking thoughtfully at something for a long time. So, an example of how you might hear this used: the student looked at the essay prompt with contemplation, right? So, maybe this has happened to you where you've been asked to write something maybe for a test or an assignment, right? And this is a person who's really, really thinking it over, right? They didn't read it and just, I'm going to immediately start to write. No, this person is going to take some time and process, maybe make a plan of some kind. And that actually connects to our second definition of this noun contemplation. It can be the state of being thought about or the state of something being planned. So, an example of this in a sentence. We are in a period of contemplation as we consider expanding our services. So maybe it's a community organization or a business. Their leader expresses this idea, kind of where they are in terms of their organizational planning, right? Could we expand what we do or expand what we offer? Do we have the right people to do that? Do we have enough capacity to do it? Now, a third way you might hear that noun contemplation used can be in connection to religious meditation. So, an example of maybe how you've heard this used before: we'll spend a few minutes in contemplation after the sermon. So this might be after a religious leader has delivered some kind of message, right? Now they're kind of saying, okay, we're going to think about and kind of process what was discussed or the ideas that were shared. Another related word you might encounter is the adjective contemplative. You might also hear it said more contemplative, expressing or involving prolonged thought. So again, that idea, nothing's happening quick here with this particular verb or its related words. So an example of this: according to psychologists, contemplative practices can encourage holistic healing. So this came from a recent news article saying, right, taking time to reflect on different situations can help people deal with various bad events, even traumatic events. Also related to this is the meaning involving or given to deep silent prayer or religious meditation. So another definition or way to use this: by taking a contemplative pause, we can make space to connect with God. So again, this might be something a religious leader is saying. So encouraging people kind of to take that pause and reflect, maybe pray, whatever sort of connects to that particular form of religion. One last word for us today. It's contemplativeness. This noun means deep and serious thoughtfulness, or the trait of thinking very carefully before one acts. So, an example of this in a sentence: we shouldn't make any assumptions about his contemplativeness. So here, somebody we might be talking about who is rather quiet, seems to be thinking, maybe not expressing the process though. Here, another person is saying we shouldn't assume we know what's going on, or we know why he's doing something, right? We should just kind of be aware this is someone who tends to be thoughtful before either acting or maybe speaking. Thanks again to Kareem for making this verb suggestion, and I thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great day.